Let's be honest. The Bible is this massive, ancient library, and frankly, it can feel totally overwhelming to actually sit down and read. For a lot of people, just opening it up feels like stepping right into a labyrinth without a map. So today, we're diving into a full explainer of a seriously brilliant guide that is designed to make the whole thing incredibly accessible. We're going to look at exactly how it takes centuries of history and, pretty complex theology and breaks it all down into super manageable, highly practical daily insights.
And look, the sheer scale of the text is exactly why so many people get so intimidated. Because the Bible isn't just one standalone book, right? It actually consists of 66 separate ancient texts, and these were written over thousands of years by dozens of different authors, spanning multiple continents and languages. You've got history, poetry, prophecy, and letters just all mixed together. So that immense volume, it brings up a massive problem for the modern reader.
So the big question is, how do you actually read the most famous book in history without completely losing your way? It's kind of the ultimate reading challenge. You might start out super strong in Genesis, but man, by the time you hit those ancient laws in Leviticus, it is just so easy to lose the plot. But in this explainer, we are unpacking a tool that acts as your master key for navigating this massive library with total confidence. We'll evaluate exactly how it works and see if it actually lives up to the hype. To solve this whole reading challenge, we are looking at Jude Sterling's book, The Bible Made Simple. And wow, this is just an incredibly thoughtful reference guide. Its main promise? To help you understand all 66 of these biblical texts in just 10 minutes a day. It is explicitly designed for beginners, or honestly, just busy adults who really want a clear, structured overview, but without needing a literal theology degree to make sense of the material.
Now, what makes Sterling's approach so effective is this incredibly strict constraint he uses to keep things totally manageable. Every single biblical book, whether we're talking about the massive poetic book of Psalms or the tiny single-chapter letter of Jude, is broken down into exactly 2 pages, period. This means you literally always know precisely how much reading you have ahead of you. It makes it a perfect, predictable daily habit that you can actually stick to.
Okay, so within those 2 pages, Sterling uses this highly effective dual approach for every single entry. He carefully contrasts the historical context with modern application. So the first page is always focused on what happened, charting the narrative flow through 6 really clear story sections so you actually understand the plot. And then, the second page flips to what it means, shifting the focus entirely to 5 structured, practical takeaways that you can go and apply today.
That what it means section? It operates on just a perfectly organized framework. You get a 1-sentence summary to ground you right away, 5 key themes to help you grasp the big ideas, 5 key verses that are actually worth memorizing, a specific connection to Jesus, and finally, 4 life lessons per book. It is a highly structured, analytical format which ensures you are extracting the core value from every single text consistently.
So where do you actually start with a resource like this? Well, that's really the beauty of this whole system. Because each 2-page entry stands completely on its own, you're not forced down one single path. The guide offers 3 flexible strategies so you absolutely don't get stuck. It allows you to totally tailor your whole learning journey to your own personal goals and timeline.
You basically have 3 distinct options here. You can read chronologically, going straight through from Genesis to Revelation if you want that grand, sweeping narrative. Or you can tackle it by testament, focusing first on the history in the Old Testament and then the fulfillment in the New Testament. Or, and this is probably my personal favorite, you can just jump around by interest. You can pick texts that address your current circumstances, specific challenges you're facing, or just lingering questions you have. For example, if you use that by interest approach, you could start right at the very beginning in Genesis to explore how the text depicts creation and humanity's origins. Or hey, if you want to know how the overarching narrative ends, you can jump straight to Revelation to read that climactic vision of justice and restored new creation. The guide really lets you choose your own adventure, but without ever losing that larger context.
And as you're navigating through all these different texts, you're going to discover one of the really core analytical features of Sterling's guide. He actually traces a direct connection back to Jesus in every single book. So whether you're reading some Old Testament prophet or a New Testament letter, the guide explicitly highlights how Christ is either anticipated or actively present in that specific text, bridging the gap between these ancient eras.
In his afterwords, Sterling actually makes his overarching thesis abundantly clear. He argues that the Bible isn't just 66 disjointed, random stories, but rather one unified narrative. He positions Jesus as the central thread that essentially holds this entire ancient library together. By viewing the text through this specific lens, the guide basically turns a highly diverse collection of writings, spanning literally millennia, into a single cohesive masterpiece. To prove this point, Sterling maps out this stunning progression across the whole text. It starts with deep anticipation in the Old Testament, where the core message is essentially that Christ is coming. Then the narrative shifts right into the Gospels, where Christ is revealed through his life and ministry. And finally, it wraps up from Acts to Revelation, where the message is that Christ is proclaimed and eventually returning. It's just a really fascinating overarching arc to look at.
But moving beyond just the historical and narrative structures, the really crucial point of this explainer is evaluating how this ancient wisdom actually applies to your everyday modern life right now. Because let's be real, it's one thing to understand the history of ancient Israel or the travels of the Apostle Paul, but Sterling makes absolutely sure that every single book translates into actionable advice for your relationships, your work, and your personal growth.
Get this, because the author meticulously pulls exactly 4 life lessons from all 66 books, you're getting 264 highly practical takeaways in total. I mean, that is an incredible wealth of distilled wisdom right there. Instead of just reading ancient history and wondering, so what? You are essentially being handed this massive toolkit of character-building exercises and perspective shifts drawn directly from the text itself.
Let's look at a concrete example. Take the book of Romans. It's historically famous for having some seriously dense, complex theology, but Sterling's guide extracts a highly practical life lesson from chapters 12 through 16, this concept of presenting yourself as a living sacrifice in grateful response to salvation. It takes this really heavy theological doctrine and translates it into a daily, practical mental habit of letting gratitude motivate your everyday service.
Or we can jump over to the book of Ephesians. Here, the text provides a really fascinating contrast between ancient writing and modern social application. A practical lesson extracted by Sterling urges you to celebrate your spiritual blessings rather than getting bogged down in earthly troubles, and to actively embrace diversity in your fellowship. The big takeaway here is that since historical barriers were removed, we should be working for unity with others despite our differences today.
When you step back and look at all 66 books through Sterling's simplified lens, the structural arc becomes really breathtaking. The guide takes you from the brokenness of Eden in Genesis chapter 3, essentially Paradise Lost, all the way to the ultimate restoration of humanity in Revelation chapter 21, Paradise Restored. The author frames the whole thing as the greatest rescue mission in history, and it's all perfectly and neatly packaged for you.
I want to leave you with this powerful philosophical thought directly from the book's conclusion. Sterling reminds us that the grand story depicted in these texts is framed as still unfolding right now, and that you are actively a part of it. The courage of Daniel, or the forgiveness of Joseph. They aren't presented just as ancient trivia. They are offered as actual blueprints for personal reflection and growth in your life today.
Ultimately, Sterling's guide is designed simply as your launching pad to dive into the actual biblical text yourself, totally removing that fear of getting lost. It is a fantastic overview tool. So my final question to you is this. Using the flexible strategies we've outlined in our explainer today, which book are you going to start with? Pick one, dive in, and let the adventure begin.